There are 32 teams in the NHL, and 11 of them have never won the Stanley Cup. It's going to be a long time till every team in the league has checked championship off their to-do list. I'm here today to rank those 11 teams based on how close or far away I think they are from competing for a title. Let's start at the bottom. Number 11, it's the San Jose Sharks. They got close a couple of times in the Marleau Thornton eras, but now this roster is filled with aging players on bad, overpaid contracts. It's going to be a while until the Sharks are competing. Their prospect pool isn't that great either. They're years away from just pushing for a playoff spot, never mind a Stanley Cup championship. Up next, sadly, it's the Winnipeg Jets. I thought for a while the Jets were going to do it with that core of Wheeler, Scheifele, and Hellebuck, but now that a bunch of those pieces are being moved out, the Jets are probably going into a bit of a retooling phase. I still like a lot of pieces they have, like Morrissey, Ehlers, and Kyle Connor, even Cole Perfetti, but it's going to be a while until the Jets are back to that Stanley Cup contender status. Up next, I'm actually putting the Nashville Predators at this spot in the list. Listen, the Preds have some good pieces with Josi, Saros, and Forsberg, but there's not a whole heck of a lot else on that roster. Their prospect pool isn't that good either. I don't think they'll have enough to get it done while Josi and Forsberg are still impactful NHLers, so that means they're going to have to get it done after a bit of a rebuild. It's going to be a while for the Nashville Predators to be Stanley Cup contenders. Up next, I got the Desert Dogs, the Arizona Coyotes. Now, this offseason actually signaled a bit of a shift in thinking when it comes to their organizational philosophies. They started to spend money and stop taking on bad contracts. I think the Coyotes are learning that the best way for them to get a new arena in Tempe is to put a quality NHL team on the ice. They're focused on building a good team now. That is a step in the right direction, and they got good pieces. Clayton Keller, Logan Cooley, among others. I like what's building in Arizona. They're a long ways away, but I like what they got going on there. After that, we're going to go to the NHL's newest team, and it's the Seattle Kraken. They made the playoffs last year. It was a big step forward. I don't love what they've done so far this offseason, but with guys like Matty Beniers and other prospects coming up here, I think Seattle's taking some steps in the right direction. They aren't near the top of my list, but they don't quite deserve to be near the bottom. The Seattle Kraken, they're the perfect definition of the mushy middle. I could see them adding some impact pieces and taking some steps forward in the next couple of years. Could also see them taking some steps backwards. The Vancouver Canucks slide in next on my list, and this is a confusing one. Listen, they have the franchise goalie, they have a potential number one D-man in Quinn Hughes, and they have the number one centerman in Elias Pettersson, but everything after that just isn't that good, and the Canucks, quite frankly, I don't trust their management either. The Canucks have the right building blocks. They just need to surround them with more talent. If that happens, they could catch lightning in a bottle and go on a run. I don't hate what they're building, but I don't love it as much as what's going on with some other organizations. The Minnesota Wild are next on my list. Listen, Kirill Kaprizov, he's an absolute superstar. Matt Boldy, one of my favorite players to watch in the NHL. I like their blue line as well. Philip Gustafsson looks like he could be a number one for years to come. Once they get out from this dead cap period and all that dead money that came with the Parise and Suter buyouts, I actually think the Minnesota Wild can take some big leaps, not steps, leaps towards becoming a Stanley Cup contender. It's just a matter of time. I like what they're building in Minnesota. Up next, surprisingly, I got the Columbus Blue Jackets on my list. Listen, David Yaremchuk is going to make the jump to the big club next year. Him, Provorov, Severson, and a fully healthy Zach Werenski, that makes the blue line better. Cole Sillinger, Kent Johnson, and Adam Fantilli, that is a legit stud group of young forwards to go along with Laine and Goudreau and Jenner. They're building something in Columbus. It might not happen in the next year or two, but look out for what's going on in CBJ. The Ottawa Senators slide in next on my list. Similar to Columbus, I just straight up like what they're building. Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, a good group of veterans up front as well. On the blue line, it's Thomas Chabot, it's Jake Sanderson, it's Jacob Bernard Docker. Good pieces on that blue line. They need to get the goaltending sorted out. But if that happens, the Senators are not just going to be a legit playoff team. They're going to be a legit cup contender in a couple of years. Coming in at number 2 on the list, it's the Florida Panthers. They made a run to the Stanley Cup Finals next year, and you're probably thinking, why aren't they number 1? I like what they're building up front. I like those pieces. Matt Tkachuk is a stud, a top 5 player in the game. The blue line looks actually improved from the group that took them to the Cup Final. It's goaltending for me. Can you trust Sergei Bobrovsky next season? I don't know. What's Spencer Knight going to be? Is he a legit number 1 or is he just going to be a backup? It's still up in the air. There are goaltending question marks, but that is the only reason I don't have the Panthers higher on this list. Coming in at number 1, It's the Buffalo Sabres. That young blue line, Dahlin, Power, Samuelson, that group up front. Alex Tuck loves being in Buffalo. He's been a big reason why the culture has shifted in that Sabres organization. And you're playing him with Tage Thompson and the workhorse from Whitehorse, Dylan Cousins, amongst a ton of other really quality pieces in that Sabres forward group. They need to figure out the goaltending, but with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Devin Levi in their system, I like the chances of one of them being a number one goalie in the NHL. The Sabres have all the building blocks, and they have a management group that is showing they want to be aggressive in building a contender. This Sabres team is coming, and they could very well win a Stanley Cup in the next 2 or 3 years. It's crazy, I know, but I like what's going on with the Sabres and GM Kevin Adams. I'm putting the Sabres at number one on my list of teams that have never won a Stanley Cup, but are going in the right direction.